Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the How To Academy. My name is David Malone, and it's my great pleasure to talk to Dr. Ellen Vora. Good evening.
Good evening.
Ellen is a psychiatrist, acupuncturist, yoga teacher, and also the author of this, The Anatomy of Anxiety, with the important subtitle, Understanding and Overcoming the Body's Fear Response. You said something really interesting. In fact, the introduction to your book is the best introduction to a book that I've read in about a year. It is just every single word counts, and you managed to sum up everything that I need to know in the introduction. So I highly recommend the introduction. And on page 3, you said, I like this, it says, anxiety is not what is wrong with you. It's your body and mind fiercely alerting you to the fact that something else is wrong. And that's really it, isn't it? I mean, that's the message of the book, that this is a message to you, anxiety. It's not what's wrong with you. When did you come to that thought?
That's a long time coming. And I'll say, just playing off of the idea that every word counts, I think this was born out of a kind of what ended up being a fortunate mistake, which was that I was some 20,000 words over my word count maximum. And I took a very long train ride and had to ruthlessly go back through my manuscript and cut any possible fat from it. And I went through that process. It was brutal. And then I got to the end, and I did realize that my entire reference section, which is like 30 pages long, had been duplicated. And so it turns out I didn't actually need to cut a single word. I was fine on word count. But
I think it was well worth it, because the book is so easy to read. And there's this fashion at the moment, as someone who reads them a lot, for an enormously long books. And after a while, you do start to think, you know, there was 80 pages of that, which was just repetition. And there isn't any in your book.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it ended up being for the best, I think, that I had to do that process. And it's not to my credit. I really do like repetition. I love to summarize, but I got in trouble with my editor with every summary statement. She said, the readers already get this. Yeah, you don't need to.
Yeah, your book is very clear. I mean, it sort of brims over with a tone that is common sense. The book comes across as very common sense, as saying, look, just have a quick think about this, and isn't it like this? And you read it and you go, yeah, you're right, it is like that.
That's exactly my intention. And so I can answer your original question as well,
Please.
if you like.
So yeah, why not?
Basically, I think that, I mean, here's the thing, is throughout my entire process, my journey through medical school and psychiatry residency, what started to dawn on me was that the way we approach health is we're stuck in the crowning achievement of Western medicine, which was identifying infectious diseases and being able to treat them with antibiotics. And that was really what set us apart from, you know, we step in as healers, we hold space, supportive care. That's when we really started to be able to cure people. And we continue to try to get back to those glory days. And you see the evidence of this in mental health. We're trying desperately to do that, to say, well, here's a constellation of symptoms. Those symptoms equal the diagnosis of anxiety, and therefore this implies a treatment of an SSRI medication. And for some people, that formula works well, and it really creates the bridge for them to be able to feel well in their lives, not suffer, achieve a state of fulfillment. And then for millions of people, it's actually not an adequate solution. And I started to wonder if we were kind of missing the point when we think anxiety is the end of the inquiry, that that's the answer. It would be the answer if it truly implied a treatment that was a cure. But I think anxiety is really just a communication from the body. It's a collection of symptoms, and the root cause, the actual cause of it, is variable, and it's a little bit different for all of us. And so I think that the constellation of symptoms that equals anxiety is just the beginning of the conversation. And that's when we roll up our sleeves and start to understand what's at the root of this person's anxiety.
Yes, because you mentioned that the symptoms, and a lot of what you point out is that modern Western medicine is very keen to treat the symptoms, as if, you know, it would be like treating a really serious viral infection by saying, well, this person has temperature, so if we can get the temperature to go away, then we're done.
You'd be surprised, but that's actually the level of insight that happens sometimes in the conventional medical setting. And the fever, as if that was the pathology, the fever is actually the body's attempt at correcting the underlying problem. And the same goes with anxiety. A lot of what we think of as, well, these symptoms are uncomfortable and I don't want to be feeling them. And the world calls these symptoms mental illness. So let's do away with them. Let's eradicate these symptoms. Often these symptoms are a really vital communication from within. And sometimes when we suppress them, even when we medicate them away, certainly when we pathologize them, what we're doing is we're kind of putting a sticker over the check engine light. Like, this was alerting us to the fact that something else is wrong, and it warrants our attention.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. If you did, just every time a warning light came on, just put a sticky thing over that, so I'm not seeing it anymore, and then carry on driving. But
problem solved.
You also make the clear distinction between two kinds of anxiety. You know, so and two kinds of stress. Tell us about the difference, because in your way of dealing with this, they are the only thing they have in common is the word, really.
Yeah. So the way I was trained was to rely on the Bible of mental health, which is called the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And it taught me to classify anxiety in terms of whether it was generalized anxiety disorder or panic disorder, with or without agoraphobia, OCD, and so on and so forth. And the idea always with nomenclature is to steer management, is to tell us, well, if it is this, therefore the treatment is medication, psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, you know, whatever the case may be. And it wasn't steering my treatment meaningfully. Those were never my first line treatments anyway. And I started to observe that if I divide anxiety into two main categories, what I call false anxiety and true anxiety, then we're cooking with gas. Then that's a classification system that has meaningful implications for what do we do next. And with false anxiety, which is what I think of as avoidable anxiety, it's anxiety with a physical basis, where it's not, you know, all in our head. It's not just from the neck up. It's not just the chemical imbalance in our brain. If anything, those chemical imbalances are sometimes a downstream effect of a state of imbalance that's happening somewhere else in the physical body. And this kind of anxiety, it's, you know, I don't call it false to invalidate the very real suffering. It's, you know, I lived in a state of false depression for nearly a decade. That was life-altering symptoms. But in my case, it turned out to be related to things like eating gluten and being on the birth control pill. And so there was a straightforward path out. And that's what I mean by calling it false. It has a physical basis and there's a straightforward path out. True anxiety, on the other hand, is purposeful anxiety. It's not something that we should be pathologizing. It's not something that we should be medicating away. It's not something that we could go gluten-free and decaf coffee our way out of. It's an inner compass here to communicate, slow down, pay attention. There's something not right in our personal lives, in our communities, in the world at large. And there's usually a call to action baked into it. And so it's asking us to translate that feeling of anxiety into some kind of purposeful action.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing about the book is it's surprising, or it's surprising to me anyway, surprisingly positive. Because, you know, I imagine when you went to your publisher, said, guess what? I want to write a book about anxiety. And yet it's not an anxious book. It's a very hopeful book, and it's a very positive book, because on the one hand, with what you call the false anxiety, as you say, it's something out of whack in your body that's being caused by something in your environment. Therefore, there's at least the chance that you can fix it. So that's rather positive. And then the true anxiety, which we'll talk more about later, I suppose. As you say, it's you paint it as this is your moral compass. tapping you on the shoulder saying, you know what, you're on the wrong path. Something's not right. And you, some part of you knows that. And again, there's something very positive in it, which I found surprising, because you know, they said, I've got a book for you to read, The Anatomy of Anxiety. I didn't go, yay. But by the time I got 100 pages in, I was thinking to myself, you know, I'm rather enjoying this. I have another cup of tea and finish it off, which is pretty good for a book on anxiety. So look, let's talk about the false anxiety, because as you say, you're not saying, look, it's false, you're not really in pain. You're very clear, yes, all of the suffering you're feeling is real, but we can figure out what's causing it.
Yeah, and I think it was really important to me to write a book that didn't leave people feeling more anxious. You know, I'm not a historian, I am a psychiatrist. I am in the business of relieving human suffering. And, you know, it's at this point, second nature for me to co-regulate with people, how I use my voice, how I use my words. I want to help lift people up. And then I am inherently optimistic about mental health. I think that the situation right now is grim. It was already bad. It's gotten precipitously worse through the pandemic, through the events geopolitically these days. We are really struggling. But I personally went through a journey of being in a lot of false moods and healing that. And now I am exactly the happy, optimistic person that I, in the past, looked at and thought, how irritating and oblivious must that person be, you know, that they feel optimistic. But I had the firsthand felt experience of going from feeling anxious and feeling depressed to feeling well. And I, in a kind of, it's almost like a compulsion, I want other people to at least know that this path is available to them. Yeah. So false anxiety, here's the thing. We evolved on the proverbial savanna of human evolution under a very different set of circumstances. And I'll be the first to say, I don't want to be back there. Like, I enjoy hot showers. I enjoy a really comfortable mattress. But I do think that we just have to be savvy about the fact that our genes evolved to expect a certain set of circumstances. And we have an internal clock that cues our bodily rhythms. It cues our ability to sleep. It cues our ability to wake up and have energy and to feel motivated. And all of that is related to our external environmental cues. And our brain, our immune system rely on certain raw materials. And these things were easier to come by. And we sort of had the right cues on the savannah. And now everything is helter-skelter in modern life. So we just want a little bit of knowledge so that we can be strategic. And when it's comfortable and available, to approximate some of those conditions. And so that's the basis of false anxiety, is to understand how modern life, with our artificial light after sunset, with our nutritionally bankrupt processed foods, with our technology, with our inflammatory diets, and the broad assault on the health of our digestive tract, that all of these things impact our mental health, and that we can make little adjustments to our diet and lifestyle to approximate evolutionary conditions and help us feel better.
And as you say, there's a very solid scientific basis for this, because as you say, I forget how many neurons there are in the gut, but it's a very large number. I mean, it's as many neurons as the average dog has in its head. So there's a lot of and they're neurons too. They're not nerve cells. I asked a physiologist about this. I said, surely you're just meaning nerve cells, and he told me off and said, no, I said neurons, and I'm a professor and I meant neurons. So there's a whole lot of thinking going on down there. And as you say, most of the communication is up from your gut to your head. And it's as you say in the book, the mistake is to think, I'm feeling anxious, I've got, you know, my mind is uncomfortable, and this is making my body uncomfortable. You're saying, no, it's the other way around. Your body is not working well, and that's the thing that's making your mind uncomfortable.
Or more accurately, it's both. But it is about 80% afferent, so communication from the gut up to the brain, and only about 20% top down. But culturally right now, the conversation hinges on the top-down communication. That's the part we get. We think, I'm anxious for this exam that I'm going to take tomorrow, and therefore I have diarrhea. And that's valid. That's also true. We evolved to evacuate our bowels when we're about to go into an acute stress response. And that makes sense. We're lighter, we're able to run faster and think more clearly. But the part we're missing in the public conversation is that there is also communication from the gut up to the brain, primarily along the vagus nerve, really important cranial nerve. And basically, it's giving a state of affairs report up to the brain all the time. And if our digestive tract is funky, which for many of us in modern life it is, we take antibiotics, we drink chlorinated tap water, we live under conditions of chronic stress, we eat processed food. And so our digestive tract is really compromised. We have an unhealthy gut lining, we have a decimated gut flora. And so the vagus nerve is telling the brain a signal of things are not okay down here. Feel uneasy, rest, make different choices so that we can feel better. And so we just need to start appreciating that it's not always top down, and sometimes it's a bottom up communication. And I think that the physical basis for feeling unwell, it's an easier entry point. Like if it's all about the top down, well, that's 7 years of psychotherapy on the couch, get started. But when it comes to a physical basis for feeling unwell and struggling with mental health, that's something we can usually address in a matter of weeks or months. And it's a nice straightforward path to relieving a lot of unnecessary suffering.
Now, you do spend quite a lot of very practical time in the books, detailing the things which you say, look, these are parts of modern life, which we may like for other reasons, but here's the short list of things which I think are probably playing havoc with your anxiety, with your body. And it's interesting because we talked about the gut, and there are a whole list of things which you say you should try and avoid these, and other things where you say you may have been told to avoid these because there's some popular diet and it's got nothing to do with it. So I lost track of the number of industries that you probably have annoyed. I think you must get very few Christmas cards.
I might have a target on my back. Yeah, I worry sometimes. Yeah, I mean, it's important to me to operate with integrity, and it probably means I get invited onto fewer morning shows. But we are our media, our government. It's very heavily intertwined with certain very powerful industries that are not necessarily inherently evil, but sometimes we just need to make very conscious choices in how we navigate their products. And that's true with media. I think it's true with food and the wine and spirits industry and pharmaceuticals. And I think, yeah, I have annoyed a lot of industries, unfortunately.
And you also